Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, pretty much anything else I want to talk about. And this can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and especially YouTube, where you can also find the video. And if you're just listening, you should check out the video because I'm taking this mask off now. I was wearing a mask, this is the actual mask that I wear when I go. It's actually just a bandana because I can't make myself buy a mask yet. Anyway, you can find that video on Annette or YouTube/Annette Talks. And also you can find me on Facebook/Annette Talks. Also, masks mess up the hair, which is another dance. Anyway, we are going to be talking about masks today. To mask or not to mask, that is the question. And I'm joined by Alena Ericksen. Hi, Alena.
Hello, good to be here with you.
Did I pronounce your name right?
Alena, but I answered everything.
Alena. Okay.
Yeah.
So you and I go back a little ways, and we met first through BYU, Idaho. And then we were Facebook friends, and I started noticing that you were commenting on a lot of my posts and that you made a lot of sense and that we were kind of on the same page on a lot of things. And but you also brought a new element to the discussion on masks that I don't have the background on because you are a master herbalist. Mm-hmm. And you said you went to the School of what? Natural Healing?
School of Natural Healing, yes, here in Utah. It was founded by Dr. Christopher in 1953.
Great. All right, because when we would start talking about masks and the virus and everything, you would bring another element about how we should be taking care of our own immune systems and taking responsibility for our health. And so I want to bring you on partly for that, but partly because you're a freedom-loving, outspoken lady like myself, and I felt like you're a kindred spirit. I thought, let's have you come on and we can have the same discussion, only more so than what we've been doing on Facebook. So I'm glad to finally see you, not in person, but at least on video. And so we are going to be talking about masks and coming at the mask issue from a lot of different angles because there are a lot of angles to this whole thing. And what's interesting is that, the stay-at-home orders have really been controversial, and both sides have really kind of lined up. The more conservatives tend to be like, let's open up, and the more liberal tends to be like, no, let's stay shut down. But then masks came around, and they're almost more divisive than the stay-at-home orders. Really interesting. Like, I didn't expect that. But as soon as I started talking about masks on Facebook, wow, I got so much reaction. And so I wanted to talk about this, and I've been talking about it so much on Facebook recently that I'm ready to have this podcast and then post it and then be done with it for at least a while.
I hear you.
Yeah, it gets to be a bit much. But so I wanted to start out with, why we're wearing them and if they're effective. And I remember the end of April, I saw a video from the CDC, and she ended with, and healthy people don't need to wear masks. And that's like totally, we're a 180 from there. And they've now said, the CDC and the WHO and whoever else, have all jumped onto that. We should all be wearing masks because we don't know when we're sick. We could be asymptomatic, and so we don't want to spread it, and we're going to wear them. And so now we see several cities, counties, states are making it mandatory to wear a mask outside. I'm right next to a city, the city of Lone Tree, that's requiring it, where our county has said we're not required to wear it. And so between the being required in several areas and stores wanting to open up, it's becoming like almost a culture of we're all going to wear masks. And so, to go back, I want to talk about whether they're effective. And I've looked up several articles and opinion pieces where they refer to studies or reports. And, well, I'm just going to read a little bit of this one that I got from, I believe this was a BBC article, but it's a British study, and several doctors talked in a report about whether they thought masks were effective. And so the question was, should everyone be wearing face masks about the coronavirus? And it says the conclusion is based on analysis of 3 considerations, including the role of droplets as a route of transmission and whether masks can help to reduce dispersal of droplets. However, authors note there are only a small number of studies. And so they basically say that the evidence falls short of delivering new evidence. And so they don't really have any evidence that says, yes, these are highly effective. They say that there is some effect, that there can be some effect, but it's not conclusory. It's not for sure that these are effective. One of the earlier statements is our analysis suggests that their use could reduce onward transmission by asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic wearers if widely used in situations where physical distancing is not possible or predictable, contrasting to the standard use of masks for the protection of wearers. The report notes, if correctly used on this basis, face masks, including homemade face cloth masks, can contribute to reducing viral transmission. So there's a lot of cans, maybes, shoulds, and some of the conclusion that they kind of reach is that if you're really close to someone, because they mentioned not being social distance, if you're close to someone, then the droplets of that sick person shouldn't go through the mask and you shouldn't get sick from being close to that person. But another report I read said that mostly when it's transmitted, it's not through the droplets or coughing, it's through touching something that a sick person has touched and then touching your face, because then it goes into your mucous membranes, which is how you get sick. And so social distancing actually seemed to be more important as far as transmitting from coughs or sneezes than a mask. And
well, and interestingly enough, the Blaze and the Wire made a comment about CDC. May 20th, they came out and said, we really think that this is more of a communicable disease or an infection where people get it from being really close to other people. So it's not so much even a hard surface issue.
Right, it doesn't live on the hard surfaces, yeah.
So now they're kind of changing a little bit again, and I think we're seeing that. Like, the story is changing from the beginning of this to the end on what we needed to do to protect ourselves.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's so frustrating about it, is because some of the other things that doctors have said about this report, it says the report is overly optimistic about the value of face coverings, and it is incorrect to conclude that the evidence shows that face covering can reduce viral transmission in the community. He said there is, in fact, no good evidence that face coverings achieve this. And he says the report largely ignored real-world data, which suggests low effectiveness, albeit for protection of the wearer. And so a lot of these are saying it's really not for the protection of the people that are wearing it, it's for the protection of the people they come in contact with. And so, which implies that if you're sick, okay, if you're sick, wear a mask. To me, that makes sense. I mean, I don't know if I was sick, if I had to go out and I was sick, then I would wear a mask. If I was sick and I knew I was sick, I just wouldn't go out. I wouldn't do that to people.
Well, that's what we've always kind of done. If you're sick, then you take on that responsibility to protect yourself and to protect others, right?
Right.
I think, I have a few quotes thoughts from Dr. Blaylock. He's a neurosurgeon. He said he agreed there's really not a lot of scientific evidence for the COVID, but he brought in the 17 flu studies that were done with masks, and every single one of them were inconclusive.
Oh, gosh. And
in conjunction with this, Dr. Bart from Orange County, California, he said, they are not as effective as we are led to believe, because too many people are touching and adjusting and, touching things and then touching their masks. And so again, but it goes back to the thought, are we really to make the statement that you're only protecting others, it's not about you, is kind of contradicting, because how do you protect others but then not protect yourself? So if I'm a healthy person and I'm wearing a mask, and if somebody has droplets that come at me, shouldn't that mask protect me?
Yeah,
it should be a two-way thing. So I personally don't agree with that argument, but even the Utah State epidemiologist said masks will not protect those wearing them from the transmission of the coronavirus. So my state doctor said this. She's saying that especially homemade masks, they haven't been studied and they're probably not effective. So it's just kind of, and this is also interesting, a New York study found that 60 to 70% of the people who contracted this virus were in their homes, or they were in some kind of a...
Isn't that interesting? That,
yeah.
And we don't know. That's one of the biggest problems about this whole thing is we don't know. And so I feel like so many governments are just taking a shotgun approach. Like, oh, that might work. Let's do it. That might work. Let's do everything. Let's, first it's let's shut down everything, which is ironic because I just read yesterday online, someone posted a report from doctors that was, there were 3 epidemiologists.
Yeah, I had to.
That's a hard word. Anyway, 3 of these guys who were specialized in epidemics and viral transmissions, bacteria transmissions, etc., had written a report that was published in 2016. They went through all of these different options, including shutting down, social distancing, masking, shutting down restaurants, schools, everything. And at the very end of the report, they basically said, we don't recommend doing any of those things. Those things would be catastrophic to the community. And he says, and this what was very appealing to me was that at the end he said, we should be isolating or quarantining sick people and washing hands and wearing a mask if you're sick. And it was all the things that I said at the very beginning of this thing when they were shutting everything down. I said, why are we not just keeping people who are like elderly or immune compromised in some other way? If you are someone that's at high risk, why don't you stay home? And then the rest of us get out. And then if you become sick, you stay home. But for some reason, we all had to stay home. And now it feels the same with masks. Instead of if you're sick or if you're compromised, why don't you wear a mask? Now it's everyone, because we heard that it might be effective, the little teensy bit effective. We want everyone to wear a mask all the time when you're outside. I mean, when I see people out on a walk wearing a mask, that's been debunked by everyone. Everyone agrees you don't need to wear a mask when you're out for a walk. And so when I see that, it tells me that, people are like buying into the idea. If you leave the house, you better have a mask on. Or in cars, the same thing. What are you protecting yourself from in your car? If there's nobody else, or if you're in a car with your kid that you live with, but I wanted to throw one other thing out there about effectiveness before we move on. But what's interesting is this is one of those articles too where it says, well, we know it doesn't do much, but something is better. This is one of their lines. Something might be better than nothing. And it's like, anyway, but at the end it says, if you're healthy and want to wear a mask or are now required to do so, it's also crucial to do it properly. Buy disposable masks, not cloth ones, which everyone at the top level of government is saying, just make a mask or whatever. Go home and sew a mask, do your part. The warm, moist environment near your mouth makes it likely that a more permanent mask will harbor bacteria and viruses, thus increasing your chances of getting sick. Though if cloth is all you have and you're in close contact with someone who's ill, washing it regularly may still be better than nothing. So it's, this much effectiveness. If you have a fabric mask, make sure you're washing it after each use. You'll need to wear the mask all the time, since you never know when you might be around an ill person, and you'll have to, again, I thought we were protecting other people. And you'll have to make sure you don't keep touching your face to adjust the mask. That would be wildly counterproductive. When you remove it at the end of the day, make sure not to touch the front, which may be contaminated with viral cells. Remove it by the ear straps. Otherwise, you're just transmitting everything the mask has been filtering out all day onto your hands, which will likely touch your face several times in the next hour. Again, counterproductive. So it's like, okay, so you're going to do this because it's better than nothing, but make sure you do it exactly right. Otherwise, it's going to be worse than nothing. And then it says, at the end, it's like, washing your hands is much more effective than wearing a mask. So the conclusion that I'm reaching from everything I've seen about wearing masks, and even our county, what was funny is the Tri-County Health Commission, which governs Douglas, doesn't govern, they're supposed to give us their advice. but we're acting like they're in charge. They even have, I asked them, are we required to wear masks? And they actually sent me the PowerPoint that they used in their meeting when they discussed whether to make this mandatory or not. Despite biologic plausibility, no community-based studies actually proving their effectiveness. Mm-hmm. But, the city of Lone Tree right next to me, which is also in our county, have taken it on themselves to make it mandatory. So I'm just going to say it's obvious from any study you find, even these tri-county health folks, which are supposed to be our, the ones that know, do not say this thing is definitely effective. It's better than nothing, maybe, kind of, sort of, if you do it right. So,
well, and if I may, I would like to quote Dr. Bart from Orange County again. I kind of like how he said this. He said, theoretically, the idea is being perpetuated that we are crop dusting the planet. I loved how he said that, crop dusting the planet with pathogens. He said, there's just not the evidence for that.
That's hilarious.
And, I think you mentioned immunocompromised people, because I've heard a lot of good people that care about the immunocompromised people, and so they're mentioning, well, we need to protect them. So let's study how many immunocompromised people do we have in the U.S. There's about 330 million people in the U.S., and they estimate 3% of the population is immunocompromised.
And yet that's not what I saw somewhere, and I don't even know where, there's so much out there that something like 25% of people have something, and I don't know if you consider it immunocompromised or not, but like diabetes or heart condition, maybe other things that would make them more susceptible to COVID-19. And I don't know how true that is either. Although we're going to get...
Isn't it interesting, though, that they are saying that about a virus they don't know anything about?
Yeah.
Because, my dad has a heart condition, and they've told him the same thing. Hey, you're really susceptible. I'm just going to make the blanket statement that anybody who is weak in any way is susceptible.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And that's the funny thing, too, is because I've been reading about other things that can compromise your immune system, and fear and anxiety do that. Yeah. And so let's put everyone in masks, and we're going to go to that next, because I think the main reason that people are wearing masks is out of fear, and so they think that wearing a mask gives them protection. It's a visible thing that they can see, and they can look and see that everyone's wearing a mask. Oh, I'm safe, because everyone's made me so fearful. And yet, why are we afraid when that's going to take us to the next topic, which is the numbers and how deadly is this COVID-19? Because when this thing first started and we saw, the video coming out of Italy, and people were being, hauled away in coffins and everything, and it looked like the end of the world. Like, I was expecting, when they announced all these stay-at-home orders, I was expecting to look at it in my neighborhood and see ambulances, screaming past with sick or dead people, because obviously this thing is terrible, or else because we had to shut down everything. I was expecting, like, bring out your dead kind of thing, and we're not seeing that. I have another study here. Again, this is the BBC one. And it says the UK government scientific advisors believe that the chances of dying from a coronavirus infection are now between 0.5% and 1%. This is the lower than the death rate among confirmed cases, which is 4% globally in WHO figures. And so the problem is, you can either go by who's been tested and who hasn't been tested. But if you go by who's not been tested, then 0.5 and 1%. It's just extremely, extremely low. And so, and then they break it down further, and the higher percentage is amongst people who are 80 and over. So 80 years old and over is the highest percentage. And then 70 to 79, 60 to 69, 50 to 59, and so on and so forth. And so the people that are most at risk are the very elderly. Okay, here it is about underlying health conditions. Cardiovascular, diabetes, respiratory disease, high blood pressure, those are higher. They are higher risk than people without those conditions. But even so, even cardiovascular, it says you have like I want to say it looks like about an 11% chance. So still your chances are greater, but still not what we were kind of led to believe. I mean, it felt like one in three of us or 1 in 4 of us were going to die or get really sick. And it's just not happening. And so
yeah, I think it's good to mention. So my husband works at the hospital, and all the coworkers. Well, let me back up. He worked around a woman. She was elderly, and she found out that she was with somebody who had COVID. So she went and got tested. Her test came back positive, so they said, okay, you'll need to go home and quarantine for a while. All she got was tired.
Yeah.
There were no other for her. I'm not speaking for everybody.
She was elderly, so she didn't have many symptoms other than being tired.
Yes, so she was just way tired. Well, my husband worked with her, so he was exposed and never got it that we know of. I mean,
so we are not obviously we are not guaranteed to get this thing just because we're exposed, or
right.
We might get it and never have symptoms. And
yes, and that was the other thing I was going to bring up really quick was a lot of the coworkers that he works with, they just out of curiosity went and got tested, and every one of them never got sick and have the antibodies.
Huh.
So and I've had conversations with different nurses and said, tell me, what is it like? What are you seeing? If you didn't know anything about COVID, would you say this is a new thing? And again, maybe it's different for our area. They talk about viruses mutating. Maybe it's mutated since it came from China or whatever that story is.
Yeah.
We don't know, but the nurses have told me here that it's just very similar to a respiratory viral infection that they're exposed to all the time, every year. I mean, there's a few different symptoms, but most of the time people are sent home. So
yeah, and so to me, I know one person that's gotten sick, and she was hospitalized, and she is on a long, long road to recovery now. I don't know what her underlying conditions are, or if she has any. She's not in the at-risk. I would say, I hate to even guess on age, but maybe late 50s, early 60s. So there's some increased risk, but not much at that age. And she's gotten deathly ill. She, I guess, barely made it. She did make it. She's at home now. She's recovering. That's the one person that I know. I've heard rumors. I heard about one guy that I kind of know. I don't know anyone that's died. I don't know anyone else that's gotten sick. And so, yes, it can be very nasty. We've seen it. I mean, she was on a ventilator for a while, and it was very nasty. But that's one person. And so I don't know. I don't understand where all the fear is coming from, unless it's just that people are spending too much time watching the news, who are doing a really great job of spreading fear, because if you'll watch them, they're going to say whatever it takes to get you to watch them. So if they can keep the fear level up here, they'll do that. But
well, and that's a really good point, because when you ask why are people so driven to wear them, and I that's not the argument I want to make, because people need to do what they feel that is right for them.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what we know psychologically. Here's what we know. We fear unknown risks. So if you don't know something, you're more likely to fear. And you hit it right on the nail when you said, if the media is perpetuating fear and somebody's watching that and only that, then they're going to be afraid.
Yeah.
She also said, when people feel out of control, then they need something to gain control.
Yeah.
And so if that is wearing a mask to feel like you're in control, to make you feel, people will do that. Herd mentality is real. It's also called behavioral mimicry.
Mm.
So if everybody's doing it, I guess I should too.
Yeah.
But, and this was really interesting. We don't know the effects on children.
Yeah, that really concerns me. But what we do know is that kids don't get COVID-19. It's just not, and they don't spread it to each other.
But even the mask wearing is what I'm saying. We don't know the effects of children, because if you take a baby relies on the parent's facial expression cues. In fact, 70% of human communication is not verbal.
Right.
It's body language. And a lot of that is facial. So when we cover that up, I think it's a reason to say We're already socially distancing because of electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And now we don't even have the face to do that much.
Yeah. And that's what that raises a really big issue. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that, you know, when these health specialists or the CDC or whatever, when they put out recommendations, what they're doing is they're putting out a recommendation for the best way to get rid of that virus. And that's it. That is the only thing that they're looking at. And so they ignore, and that's because that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to prevent viruses from spreading. That's their job, to give that advice on doing that. But it largely ignores everything else, all the effects that what they're recommending create. And so, okay, if that's all you want to focus on is that, and that's better than nothing, I might buy that argument. Okay, the only thing we're worried about in this world right now is getting rid of the virus. That's it. Period. End of story. Then I might go along with it. And that's why I want to talk about the effectiveness and the death rate first. Because if you could show in studies, let's say that we've been through this like 20 years ago, and everyone wore the masks, and it was 100% effective, and as soon as everyone masked up, the thing went away, right? And couple that with maybe the death rate was 25% or something horrendous like what we thought it was going to be, then I might be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Let's mask up, kill this thing, be done with it. But that's not the case. First of all, we know that they're not effective, and we know the death rate is not high. It's highly contagious, but not very fatal. So
but we also have to consider, and this is from, I'm trying to remember which doctor, it was either Dr. Ericksen or Dr. Bark, and they said that once any kind of illness hits herd immunity at a level of 50 to 80%, the virus starts dying off on its own or mutates because it doesn't have anywhere else to go. So really, herd immunity is what we are aiming for, and it's what we've always done. It's what nature has done, not the other way around. And so
good news about the masks, I guess, which is they're not very effective. So we're hopefully going to get the herd immunity. But what I was getting at is that we are not just focused on the virus. We are well-rounded people that live in this world and want to live. We want to live. We do not want to, cower in our rooms and do just everything we can to stay alive. We want to live.
And you bring up a good point, because that's the field I'm going into in a master's, is mental health.
Yeah.
And you can't hardly get an appointment right now. Mental health is a crisis.
And that was another one of those things they said in that report where they said, don't shut things down. They said, because you're going to cut off essential services. It was so funny. It was like reading a report that was done like 5 years from now saying, oh, this is really bad that you did all these things because this is what happened. These guys in 2016 were saying, this is what will happen if you do this. And yet that was completely ignored, which tells me that there's more to work here than just trying to cure the virus. But anyway, so wearing masks is not just affecting the virus. It has other effects. And one of them is that it is making the climate of fear worse. Because when you go out and you see, especially like when you see people on walks, that's just ridiculous. I discount the people that are wearing them on walks. But when I go into the store, because I love going to Target, it used to be my favorite thing and now it's my worst ever thing. And I walk in and I only go to the stores that don't require masks, because I'm not going to get into it with a store owner because they're just trying to keep their store open. Or with a cashier. And I absolutely hate it when I hear people not wanting to wear masks and they're yelling at cashiers or whatever. People, let's be decent. Whatever you're doing, be decent. But when you walk in and like, it just happened yesterday, which is one of the reasons I'm thinking about this so much, but I walk in and everyone's masked up with the exception of maybe I saw 5 or 6 other people not wearing them. And my first thought was, this is just like, it's very dystopian. I feel like I'm in some kind of an environment where we're afraid of each other, and we're afraid of everyone around me is going to get me sick. And so I've got to protect myself from that. And then secondly, I can't see mouths. So I'm hard of hearing. So that makes it hard. I can't read lips. So there's that. But then there's also the other bigger thing, which is this is a very visual way to see if people are complying or going along with what everybody else thinks should be done. And so I felt like a total fish out of water. Like, I'm this, I know I'm being perceived as a selfish, want to kill people, bad person or whatever, because I'm not wearing a mask. When in reality, we just talked about why I don't believe masks are the answer. And so it's virtue signaling now to wear a mask, because I follow the other side on Facebook. I see what they're saying, and they are saying things like, you're selfish, you don't care, you want to kill people. And that's the attitude that if you're taking as a mask wearer to a non-mask wearer, that's also a bad road to be going down, especially when I hear that we're going to be going into a new normal where everyone's going to be wearing masks forever. And I'm like, heck no. Yeah. And so I'm not going to wear one, when I'm in a store where I'm not required to wear one, I won't wear one. I will stay social distance from you, because that's what you do anyway. I mean, I won't pass right by someone in a grocery store anymore. I will give them their distance, because I respect everyone's need to feel safe, and I respect everyone's need to, have a reasonable amount of room between us. Now, occasionally I'll wear it, and if I see an elderly person, I will put my mask up because I want them to feel safe. Again, it's about making other people feel safe, even if I think it's not really effective. But I'm not going to conform to the point of, yes, I'm going to wear a mask whenever I leave the house and whenever I go to a store if I don't have to, because I think it's a very bad precedent that we have this mentality that we're all going to fall into line and do something because a few people think it's a good idea, even though these studies don't support it. I'm just not. So,
and I think it's important, as we mentioned before we started recording, that a few issues I have with the mask, and you can see me on Facebook. I quoted Candace Owens and said, I won't be wearing a mask, or I won't be copiously washing my hands more than I usually do. And the reason I say that is because, not because I don't care. It's not because I don't love others, or I don't think that, we need to take precautions. My issue is that there are probably a lot of people who don't want to wear a mask and just do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I think, again, like you said, if this was a real threat, if this was, people dying left and right, and if this was a real issue, of course we need to do what we need to do.
Right.
But the bottom line is if I'm wearing a mask and I don't agree with it, then I'm saying I agree with it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I wrote Costco and I said, I have loved your store. I have loved your products. Our family has relied on those things, but I want you to know I disagree with the mandated mask wearing. Mm-hmm. I respect you're a private company. And so I'm choosing not to shop there.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of people bring in the idea that, but we're supposed to wear, there's restaurants that say no shoes, no shoes, no shirt, no service. We need to remember that's a private store. Yeah. They have the right to say that.
But I also hate that they equate shoes and shirts. I've seen this from, well, if you're going to put on shoes and shirts, what's the big deal about putting on a mask? That is like apples to oranges right there. Covering up half of my face is not the same thing as covering my shoes or my feet or my private parts, for the love of Pete. Yeah. So I hate that argument, but I totally agree that private companies can do whatever they want. And that's one of the reasons why I will sometimes soften on the mask issue, because so many of these businesses have been waiting to open again. And if requiring masks allows them to open and make a living, then I will comply gladly with them. Now, if people are still looking for us to do this in 3 months and 6 months, I'm not going to. I just won't go to your store.
Which again, it brings up the point that if we have a problem with this, if we internally don't feel that it's right, we need to do the appropriate civic thing civilly. Yes. Yeah. We need to write our government officials. We need to write the store owners, the managers. We need to say, respectfully, this is how I feel. Include the science behind it.
Yeah.
And, I think we need to, as a people, as a whole, this is our country. Yeah. And I think we need to remember that.
Yeah.
So
we're the home of the free, right? The land of the free, home of the brave. Whatever happened to that? It's like all of a sudden we're like the land of the, well, will you let me go outside without a mask? And I'm too scared. I mean, what? Come on. You know what it reminds me? This is so funny. I just watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind with my girls the other day. And I don't know if you remember, there's a part where Richard Dreyfuss is feeling drawn to the mountain where the UFO is going to show up. Oh, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this. Anyway, and so he goes, but the government has decided they need to keep everyone off of that mountain because they know the UFO is going to show up. And so they come up with a story that there was some kind of a chemical spill or something, and that the air is contaminated. And so don't come up here because you'll die. And so all of the soldiers and everyone up there is wearing gas masks to make it look like that's really happening. And so Richard Dreyfuss goes up there and one of the other actresses, and they're going up there. They've got their gas masks with them, but he says, there's nothing wrong with this air. I just know there is nothing wrong with this air. And of course he was right. He was being totally lied to. And so now when I go out, because as soon as the civilians would walk away, they would take the gas masks off. The government officials take the gas masks off because of course there's no problem with the air. It was just to keep them afraid so they wouldn't come up to the mountain. So it's so funny when I go to the store and I see the masks, I just think, now I think about them, like, there's nothing wrong with the air, people. Take off your masks. It's okay. I just want to say that, like really, let's not be so afraid. 1% death rate chance, and that's if you're over 80 or if you have some other underlying issue. So let's not,
And again, what's, aside from this one supposedly being more contagious than the flu, would these people have died from the flu anyway? But, the argument, the position that I take isn't to convince anybody of what they need to be doing. If it's okay, I wanted to just kind of touch on a little bit of the principles of the Constitution and compare that.
I don't know. We don't talk about the Constitution on this show.
Well, since we are speaking of rights, so the founding fathers had a predicament.
Just joking. That's one of the main tenets of this podcast.
I totally caught your sarcasm.
All right, go for it.
But the founding fathers had a predicament because as they were formulating our country and the Constitution, they had a heavy decision to make of whether or not people could govern themselves. And they decided the people were innately good and that they could govern themselves. They could make decisions. And because we're humans, we make mistakes, that if we go off on a wrong course, we're going to right it. And they had to jump off the deep end and they had to trust that. And so they had to formulate the government to protect people's unalienable rights. Unalienable, for anybody who doesn't know, are rights from God. That's your right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. So the problem people have is that I believe the founders felt that that was an individualistic approach driven by conscience. The pursuit of happiness is a person's drive according to their conscience, according to what they believe. And so what this whole mass thing, I'm not going to tell somebody else what they have to believe. They need to follow that and guide, do that for themselves. But what is really interesting is that God created people to be thinking, logical, breathing human beings, right? He wanted us to think through these things. And God, he respects individuality. He respects agency. He expects us to go and do the research, search, ponder, and pray. If all you're doing is watching CNN, you might be in trouble. You need to go and expand your research, to study it a little bit more. And so God wants us to be individuals and to research what is right for us. If we think about this, in the church, God doesn't do massive baptisms. It would be nice to go to the temple and take 100 names and just do them at once. But no, it's about the individual. Mm-hmm. Conversely, Satan is very different because his plan was to just make everybody. It's a one-size-fits-all. It's the good of all, which is scary language because that is right from the Communist Manifesto, right, for the good of all. And so I like what Dennis Prager said, and I kind of agree with him. I get where he's going. He said, liberty is about virtue, and human survival is about instinct. So liberty and religion, or liberty and God, go hand in hand. But as human beings, we have a desire to survive. So the natural man or woman in us says, I've got to survive. And so oftentimes socialism or communism are stemmed from that desire to just survive, the instinct to survive. And so we either operate on a foundation of faith, or we operate on a foundation of fear. And those are really important things to remember. I wanted to quote Ezra Taft Benson. He said, the final analysis, what the framers did under the inspiration of God, was to draft a document that merited the approval of God himself, who declared that it should be maintained for the rights of protection of all flesh. We have a reason to celebrate our agency, our freedom, and our right to live life according to our conscience. So if you believe in wearing a mask, then do it.
Right.
And if you don't, you shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
And by all common sense and reason, if we were to say, okay, we're saving the planet, we're saving that one person, that person that might have an immunocompromised, then we should have been born with a mask. Because we are human walking pathogens. It's just,
right.
it's crazy.
It almost sounds like you're saying teach them correct principles and then allow them to govern themselves.
Yes, yes, because, and if we were to say, but it's not, I've heard somebody say, it's not your right to not wear a mask. Hold on. Let's back up here. Your right, the founders intended your rights to be individualistic. If you're talking about interpersonal or communal, then we have to talk about values. Because what somebody values, you cannot mandate a value. You cannot say, this is my belief and everybody has to do what I feel is right.
Right.
We all need to be advocating for choice.
Yeah.
And really, I think that's the heart and that's the solution of the issue is choice. It's agency. And it's based on value. It's driven by conscience.
Right. I have said from the beginning that if I were governor of any of these states, what I would have done is, first of all, I'll probably find, better than Fauci as someone to look to for advice. I would probably also go and find that report that I found yesterday that talks about what not to do. But I would look at all of everything, all of the evidence, everything that's proven to be effective, not effective, etc. Get it all together. And then I would go to the people and I would say, this is what I've learned. This is where you can find the same information. This is what I strongly believe. So I want you to be educated and then go make that decision. Mm-hmm. Now, if it gets to the point where it's like 25%, death rate or whatever, then we might have to start quarantining like sick people that are.
And don't you think the good people on this planet would jump to that?
Yes, of course.
I think people, it's like, I've even heard I've heard the argument that, but we have government things in place for our safety. We have speed limits and they're trying to tie it into this. These things are installed for safety. Well, I can make the same argument and say, well, okay, so the founders who believed that people could govern themselves, did they create road signs that said, walk only with your horse, trot, and gallop? Were there speed signs on their dirt roads that permitted walk, trot, or gallop? No, they believed people were smart enough. And I'm not saying, I just think people are innately good and they will want to make good decisions to help other people. It's not that anybody's trying to kill anybody. It's not that I just want what's natural. And what is natural is that we interact as human beings and that we understand that our immune systems are incredible. They're absolutely
that leads us into our last point, because obviously you have a lot more education and background in natural healing and naturally keeping our immune systems healthy. So I would like you to give us a little, maybe 5-minute overview of what people can do to gain a natural immune system, or a healthy immune system if they don't have one now, or to keep an already healthy immune system healthy.
Okay. So at the School of Natural Healing, before I went there, I had deep questions about our body's ability to heal. Because if we can cut our hand, or if we can burn our hand, or if we break a bone, our body knows how to heal. For women, we can develop a baby. For women, most women, we don't have to think about nursing. Our body just does things. And so I thought, when does that begin and end? Now, the School of Natural Healing is founded upon the principle of vitalist, which basically means that we have a blueprint to heal. Our bodies are driven and guided towards wellness and healing. If you are having symptoms, if you're having pain, that is an indication that something is wrong. And so we believe in working with those symptoms to help somebody get better. So let me give you an example. Somebody has a fever. The human body will never get above 107 degrees. And the school always taught dry heat kills, moist heat heals. So as a vitalist, what we want to do is the body is trying to get hot. We're going to help it because it's trying to do something. Most of the time, the body becomes in such a toxic state that the capillaries expand, they contract, and then the body kick-starts heat or the fever to try and sweat it out. Well, what do? We take ibuprofen or something to suppress the fever. Well, then we drive the sickness deeper. So we would never take, cough medication or anything like that that suppresses, because we want to get it out, and we help the body to do that. Now, when we talk about diet, it's the foundation for anything. And I don't mean to be crass when I say that nature has a habit of breaking down what is weak. And we see this all the time. A fish in the ocean, if it's weak or something, the other fish will eat it. I'm a gardener, and if I plant something in the wrong area, in poor conditions, it's going to be weakened, it's going to have problems. And so it's the same thing. Darwin kind of had it right, survival of the fittest, but we have to be accountable for our choices as a human population. If your diet is McDonald's, then you're constantly weakening your immune system. You're weakening your health. And we have to be accountable for what we're eating and what we're doing. Now, you gave me permission to quote the Doctrine and Covenants, section 89. And the Lord gives us a warning and a promise here. Okay, so the warning is that there will be evil conspiring men in the 4th verse. And then there's a promise in verse 21 that the destroying angel will pass. Then the beautiful thing that the Lord gives us here is direction. He gives us a pattern of how we need to eat. And there's a few things I want to point out here. And one of them is wholesome herbs. Herbs is anything that grows from the ground. Wholesome. Medically, the pharmaceutical companies will take something, and I'm not bashing anybody here, there's a place for everything. But we need to understand the difference between herbs and food and pharmaceuticals. Nature delivers balanced food. And so anytime scientists come in and they take a plant, they're like, oh, there's this healing property in the plant, we'll take out that constituent and we'll isolate it. They have created a chemical. And that's why there's side effects, that's why they can be dangerous, they need to be used with caution. You've got to use them with caution. So the Lord gave us things in wholesome state. He also emphasized fruit and vegetables in their season, which means raw. So Dr. Christopher in the School of Natural Healing, ironically, Dr. Christopher was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and his whole school was founded on the principles of the Word of Wisdom. And so he really believed in what was called the mucusless diet, and this promoted a level of pH of 7.35. And it's basically fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. He wasn't a complete vegan. He stayed away from dairy, which we don't have the time to get into, but meat has an acidity level of about 5. Dairy is about 6.5, and sugary foods are 3. So if somebody is eating a lot of those things, then they're creating an acidic environment where the body has to compromise. The body cannot survive without that 7.35 range of alkalinity in the blood. And so what it will do is oftentimes it will pull from the most alkaline source in the body, which is the bones, and then that's where osteoporosis, there's a whole bunch of other things that come into play when you're short on calcium. But we also know in the Bible, Daniel was given the same test. And we know that after 10 days of eating just plant food, he was really healthy, and he had the other word of wisdom promise of hidden treasures of knowledge. He was brilliant and bright. So, the first thing that we have to remember to do when we're trying to build our health, and that we are personally accountable and responsible for, and that's our diet. We need to remember our diet, and let your conscience guide you. But do your research. Don't just, we're meant to be thinking, logical, reasoning, educated human beings. So.
All right. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that. That's another aspect that we don't hear a lot of, if at all, from the media.
No.
Get healthy, and I take my vitamin C and my vitamin D, and actually just added turmeric recently, and that's helped with some like joint pains I've had, inflammation. I'm like, Who knew? You know, it's
Well,
helped much better than I was taking a muscle relaxant, and it would make me all fuzzy, and I didn't like it at all. But
yes.
I added turmeric, and like I'm feeling better. Wow, that's crazy.
Right.
That's awesome. I love it.
And the body is really incredible. It'll work with what you give it, but oftentimes the best thing you can do for vitamin D is sun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Probably why Florida did better.
Yeah.
But sun, again, things in their wholesome state. It is always better to eat the whole orange than it is to just take vitamin C isolated, because we don't understand all the constituents that work together and the chemistry that promotes health.
Right. But I take the vitamin C. I don't eat oranges very often. I try. I do better. I've got. It's funny.
Okay.
This all started, and I was talking to a friend, and she says, "Well, what are you doing to help you during this time?" Well, I said, instinctively, I know I need to eat more fruits and vegetables, and so I started doing that because I know that I want to stay healthy. I mean, I believe this thing is not fatal, or it's fatal, but it's not going to kill me. I believe that. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get it, although I think I've had it. But anyway, the point is I could still get it. So I want to take care of myself so that I don't get super sick if, I do get it. And I need to take care of myself so hopefully I won't get sick, because I have 3 daughters to take care of.
Yeah.
But I would much rather do it by, I go for long walks every day, out in the sunshine, out in nature, and meditate, to try and keep the stress levels low, and eating somewhat healthier at least. And I'm taking my vitamin C and my vitamin D and everything because I want to stay healthy, and I want to do it in a happy way and not, put on my mask and help not to, get the.
And if I can share really quick, a test that was done on mice, because this is really fascinating. So a few ideas. Harvard came out with a study and found that children who are raised on farms are healthier.
Huh.
They have less allergies and less autoimmune diseases later in life, less inflammation, and it's because their immune system is so strong. So to support that study, another study was done with mice, and they had a mice that was in a sterile environment. So think of lockdown. They're in a sterile environment, and they have another group that's normal. And so what they did was they tested that we know a lot of our immune system lies in our gut. What we're beginning to see and understand is that we have a whole immune system on our skin.
Huh.
We have good and bad pathogens on our skin and in our gut. And everybody knows that when you take too many antibiotics, you wipe out the good gut flora in your gut, and you're more susceptible to more infections. So what they did with these mice is they found that on the skin and in the gut, the microbes were parallel. They mirrored each other in both groups. And then they said, okay, we're going to try something. We're going to administer an antibiotic that should only affect the gut on the mice, and then redo the test. And what they found is that the skin of the mice in both groups adjusted accordingly. So if the gut was weakened, the skin was weakened. So if we are copiously washing our hands, then we don't give that signal to our bodies to fight the pathogens. And so we don't know if it's a primer, we don't know if it works together, but to connect this to nature, we know that mothers do the same thing when they nurse their babies, because they're kissing their babies and they're loving their babies. And as they're doing that, the mother's body picks up information on how to make breast milk specifically for that child's immunity because of what's in the environment. And so, and by the way, those groups of mice, the ones that were sterile, when they introduced bacteria and things, pathogens to these mice, the ones that were in a sterile environment did not fight it as well. So the key message, the key motivating message here on immunity and everything else is that we need to exercise our immune systems. We have to. They need that. They need it to be strong. But we build a strong immune system through healthy living practices.
Right. Yeah.
It's
a hard sell.
meditation.
It's a hard sell to Americans because our diet is pretty bad. And anyway, but I appreciate all of your great information and the fun conversations we have on Facebook. And I like the fact that you bring another level of knowledge to this. And do you work with clients at all on this kind of thing?
Yeah, I would be happy to. We, again, there's definitely a lot of different herbs that people can take and consider taking. I would suggest echinacea, elderberry, garlic is fantastic. Dr. Christopher this is, I don't know if you can see it.
It's light. It's kind of, yeah. The light is coming right on it.
I know, I have the window, okay. Anyway, he has a whole line of products. Dr. Christopher, you can find a lot of his things on Amazon. But there's so much that people can do, to strengthen their immune system on their own and support that through herbal supplementation.
All right, so if someone wanted to reach you for more information, where could they reach you?
Well, find me on Facebook.
All right, and so
message me. It's Alena Ericksen, ALENA, and then Ericksen is ERICKSEN.
All right. And you can join some fun conversations too.
Yes, yeah.
Find me as well that way. But all right, thank you very much for what a wonderful discussion. I finally feel like I got a lot of this mask talk off of my chest. And so now I'm going to go into the world, sometimes masking, sometimes not masking. So the answer to the question to me, from me, to mask or not to mask, sometimes if I have to, I will.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you all for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where you can hear about the Constitution, politics, etc. And you can find me on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube /Annette Talks.